predictions are tough, especially about the future, at least if you believe Yogi Berra. However, in this particular case, you're going to be able to do a little predicting about my talk because it turns out that the major thrust of it was actually foreseen by a remark that was tossed off by Ralph in his talk. I was pleased to note that he got it right. But the question that I want to think about now is if we do wake up in the future at some point, what's it going to be like? Will we have flying cars? 100 years ago, 1900, it was the scientific opinion of the entire world scientific community that heavier than air flight was impossible. Then 3 or 4 years later, the Wright brothers came along and lo and behold showed that it was possible. But something that most people don't realize is that even though automobiles existed before 1900, and there were several practicing futurists, people like Edward Bellamy and H.G. Wells and so forth at the time, nobody managed to predict the universal ownership of the motor car. And that may well have been the one thing that made the biggest difference in terms of our way of life as far as technological influence during the 20th century. Well, we have space travel. There's lots of really good reasons that we should have space travel, not the least of which is that there are more and more people on the Earth, and we're using it up because the Earth is fragile, and it's not only fragile with respect to what we do to it, but things may happen to it that cause us a bunch of problems as well. So it would be really nice to be able to move out into the rest of the solar system, if that actually makes sense, if it's not just plain science fiction. Well, you have robot servants. Actually, this is something I've spent an awful lot of my life working on. This would be just the most wonderful thing to have. And if we had actual robot servants and other artificial intelligence and highly sophisticated machinery of this kind, it would make just as huge a difference in the human condition over the coming few centuries as either flying cars or space travel. In physics, there's a thing they call the anthropic principle, which says that we shouldn't really be surprised to find that the laws of physics allow for life to exist, because here we are. Well, if we wake up in the future, there's a number of things that we shouldn't be surprised to find. Technology will have to be in a state where they can actually do the revival that's necessary. We won't wake up in a world where there are legal or moral restrictions to the extent that they won't be able to do this sort of thing. And we won't wake up in a world where the economics is so poor that there aren't the resources available to do this sort of thing. So the technology that we expect to find in the future world where we wake up, and this is sort of the classic expectation and story in this community and in related communities, is nanotechnology. So if nanotechnology really is there, and we really do have control of the structure of matter down to the molecular level, there are a few fairly straightforward implications. We're going to have bodies that don't age. I mean, this is almost obvious. If you can do it once, if you can take somebody and put them through cryonic preservation and reanimate them, then just do it again. But it's almost certain that we're going to be able to do it without quite going through the entire process and achieve the same effect. The same thing is true of disease. We should, in theory, be able to counter both invasive type and degenerative diseases, although if we're really, really stupid, we will buy Body by Microsoft and be infested with viruses and bugs. So the mere fact that in theory, the technology is capable of fixing some of this stuff doesn't mean that we can't necessarily be stupid enough to cause them to happen anyway. On the other hand, we can be significantly enhanced. Respirocytes can be more than a medical remedy. They can allow you to go and skin dive for 4 hours without taking a breath. Any number of other specific kinds of improvements in the body, as well as improvements in the brain, or at least in the way we use it. We can have built-in implants that form very capable digital assistants. But is nanotechnology of that kind really strictly, completely necessary? I don't think it actually is, although you need to be getting fairly close. I can imagine a scanning machine that was a development of electron beam lithography machines and scanning electron microscopes that could take a brain apart basically cubic nanometer by cubic nanometer and pull enough information out of it that would be able to guess what the structure had been at a level that you could recover the individual. On the other hand, of course, you'd want to build a body, and so we need molecular nanotechnology for that. The amount of information that you pull out of a brain, if you scan it at a level close enough to recover all of the information there, is a huge, huge, huge amount of data. The bottom bar here is human equivalent processing power, according to Hans Moravec, who envisions building robots with engineered software. And the next line is human equivalent processing power, according to Ray Kurzweil, who envisions essentially doing what we're talking about here, reading out the structure of a brain and simulating it on a machine. As well as I can estimate it, there's a big step up to the amount of computing power necessary just to do that readout and sort the data down into a usable form. And what that means is that given computing power is increasing with time, by the time that we have computing power necessary to do the readout, we're going to have these for a while. Okay, so here's the same basic idea. Each one of these bars is divided at a point that represents where I think the technology is now. And the extent of the bar has to do with the fact that the technologies are all getting cheaper as time goes by. I would be personally willing to try and build you a machine for $1 million with current technology that would run a Moravec-style engineered software robot. That doesn't mean anybody knows what the software is yet. But as far as the hardware is concerned, that's where I think we are now. $1 million for an AI brain. The far end of this is where I think the technology will be by the time we actually can do the brain scan. The current level for the upload brain is just way out of reach. But by the time we can do the scan, the upload brain is going to be sort of expensive but within reach. A robot body is more expensive than the computing hardware right now, but will be a lot closer to affordable by the time the scanning technology gets here. A biological body, actually being able to recreate the wetware bodies that we have now, will be really expensive, and right now I have no clue how to go about it. You can think about producing a new body by techniques kind of like cloning, but as far as I know, nobody with current technology has any clue how to take your brain and put it into that body. So, good morning. Welcome to the future. Would you like a cup of coffee? Oh, by the way, your mind is being simulated on a computer. We won't be able to build an authentic biological body for you for several years, so you might like to think about your options. And while you're thinking, I'll change the subject. This is current economic statistics from the World Bank. The top row is poor countries, the bottom row is rich countries. The left column is the natural resources per capita, and as a percentage of the total wealth per capita, not income per capita, of the people there. The point to note is that a quarter of the wealth of people in poor countries right now is just their natural resources. And this primarily means the value of the land as farmland, although there's some amount of mining and other stuff. But the bottom line here is that not much more than half of their wealth is in the form of knowledge. Basically, people in these countries are only about 4 times as well off as chimpanzees would be in the same place. Okay, because that's the natural resources that they have, and the knowledge that they have is roughly just how to be a dirt farmer and get a little more out of it than the animals would. By contrast, in rich countries today, the amount of our wealth by percentage, it's actually larger in absolute terms, but by percentage it's vanishingly small. Whereas the vast bulk of our wealth is knowledge. What I want you to do is to use the poor countries are proxy for the past. Okay, so we're going to take some poor dirt farmer who lived in 1706, just before the invention of the steam engine. His life expectancy is 30. He travels where he can walk. He maybe even probably knows someone who owns a book. Okay, he's never seen a steam engine because they haven't quite gotten it working yet. It's a year's labor to make a wool blanket. This is the economic situation people had before the Industrial Revolution. Now, I want you to take the difference between that level of technology and our level of technology today and shift it up so that the bottom end of that level, the bottom end of that difference is here, and I want you to imagine what the top end would be like. Okay, I think that's basically what Arthur Clarke meant by this famous phrase. So what's going to happen next? As I was saying before, by the time we're able to do the readout of a cryopreserved brain, the computing power and the science necessary to build intelligent machines will be here and will be cheap. Machines will do all the work. There will be nothing a human being can do better than a machine. This includes thinking. The combination of nanotechnology and artificial intelligence will be able to produce stuff that is not only as detailed in structure, but as detailed in design as life itself, at rates much, much faster than life can do that. Now, just imagine again that you're the poor dirt farmer from 1700, and you've been brought forward to today, and you want to try and make a living that was like the living that you made and be a productive member of the community and so forth. But if you actually came to today and looked around, you might find that there were more attractive options available to you now that you have the options. By exactly the same analogy, when you wake up in the future after the intellectual revolution and nanotechnology, you might very well want to try some different options than simply doing what it is you do now. Okay, so here's the map of your options. This is where you start. You're in a biological body, and you get read out into what's basically a picture, a three-dimensional picture of your brain at a very high level of resolution. In order to do anything with that, you have to translate that into a logical map of the brain that basically is a circuit diagram. The normal notion is that you're going to take this and use that to produce another version of the physical description that is fixed. Okay, it works right now. And you transfer that back into a biological body, and there you are, young and healthy and ready to go. And if you're the philosopher John Searle of Berkeley, that's what you do, because he doesn't believe that if you were to take the same mind and put it in some other substrate, that it's really a mind anymore. On the other hand, if you're me, what you do is something else. You go from this description to a different machine that can do the same things, but can do also more things. You can build a body with nanotechnology that is considerably more capable than the human body. I mean, it can do things like fly. You can build a brain that has the same amount of matter and uses the same amount of energy as a human brain that thinks 1,000 times faster. That would be a nice thing to be. On the other hand, you don't actually have to be a hardwired robot at all. You can go into virtual form and be a program that lives in a huge shared computer with a whole bunch of other programs and has much higher rates of intercommunication and access to thousands of different virtual worlds and so forth. Or you can transfer yourself into matter that has no fixed physical form, and you can decide what form you want to take from second to second. Or you can be the control program of a spaceship, or whatever else sort of thing that you want to do. And the key is you're not stuck in any one of these, because you can get from any of these places to any other place. The only reason that you couldn't or wouldn't want to go back into a biological body after having done any of these is that you have to throw away 99% of your new mind. Okay, this is the same chart basically, only on a different scale. Capability runs high and cost runs to the right. And unfortunately, the poor human body is down here in the most expensive and least capable corner. You can be enhanced by using some more nanotech and putting in your respirocytes or what have you. Or you can, for the same price, go all the way up to the dedicated robot. At the same time, if you're just really into being a human being, you can run down the cost scale and produce a nanotech version of the human body for a lot less than the same amount of cost and a lot less than the same amount of matter. According to my best estimates, the amount of matter necessary to build a body that has the same intelligence and strength as the human body is this, ballpoint pen. So you can be a perfectly good human being, including all your senses and all your other capabilities and so forth, with a nanotech substrate. I mean, either you can be a balloon at human shape or you can be an elf. But that's your option if you stay at the same capability level. If you want to go to just pure software, you can move down in cost even more, and at any one of these levels. Okay, so for any particular dedicated body, you can have a higher capability for the same price in pure software. And again, like I said before, you're not stuck in any of these. You can always transfer. Okay, so what does that mean as far as the way the world is going to work? The average person is going to be much smarter than they are now. The reason that we aren't smarter than we are now is not because we don't want to be. It's because we're all running on this same stupid hardware. Even biological humans, people who are born in those days and start out as biological humans, will be augmented in various ways, and many of them will probably just move over into some engineered form. So it's going to be a much more complicated civilization. I think probably there's going to be a range of different sort of user interfaces to the civilization. Right now, civilization can't get too complex, or else physical human beings wouldn't be able to operate with it. So there's sort of a built-in ceiling to how complex the user interface of civilization, so to speak, can get. But that'll come off. So you're going to have, I mean, right now we have different user interfaces for pets and children and adults, and it seems only reasonable to imagine that that scale is going to keep going up once we have people who are able to operate at higher levels of interaction and one hopes higher levels of responsibility. So suppose you're not quite ready for that yet, and you want to stay roughly human, or you want to be a little improved in one way or the other. What are your options? And remember again that whatever your options are, you can always change back and forth. One thing is that you can go to outer space. That's one of the dreams of people like me, and maybe possibly some of you, and I think that's going to be available to us. There are going to be a vast number of different virtual worlds that range anything from existing historical models to completely imaginary games to stuff that I can't even think of. It's probably going to be one of the major art forms. I mean, think of the amount of creativity involved in creating a world that is so interesting that all your friends will want to come and live there with you. And so this is one of the things, I mean, people are doing that today. I mean, people are really getting sucked into these massive online games, and that's just a hint of the sort of thing that it will be like when you can actually sort of live in there and be able to interact with that world as if you were right there in your physical body and feel no different than you are with the real world today. Going back to homunculi, the Latin for little man, it's the elf thing again. And the cool thing is that you can take a much larger population of actual mental human beings, people who in particular love nature and the biosphere of Earth the way it is, and want to be a part of it and take care of it. If you take people and put them in that form, they will have, not only literally but figuratively, a much smaller footprint on the biosphere. And so people whose goal in life, or who want to spend part of their life taking care of and being a part of Earth's biosphere, might want to take that as their mode of existence and tread lightly on the land while preserving the Earth. These bodies can still have considerably greater physical capabilities than the human body, but much lower mass, tolerate much higher Gs, so that a number of interesting launch schemes that require, being subjected to 1,000 Gs to get into space and so forth become feasible for people like this. They can live comfortably in outer space, on the moon, on Jupiter, essentially the range of environments that the solar system provides, with the exception of the sun. Resistant to radiation, which people don't realize how much of a problem that radiation in space poses to biological humans living out there. And of course, if they want to, they'll be able to reproduce faster than we do. So my guess is that within a century or so after the intellectual revolution and nanotechnology come about, that the majority of people in our solar system will be of this kind, simply because of these possibilities. Oh, and yeah, we will have flying cars. Well, sort of imagine the difference between putting up an apartment building with 1,000 apartments in it and going out and fixing up 1,000 100-year-old Victorian homes. The human body is like the old Victorian home. I mean, it's this cool old, thing that we like to live in. But if you engineer something new, you can skip a whole lot of the inefficiencies and the adaptations to living on the savannah in Africa, and a whole bunch of the things that are due to the fact that we're basically built out of salt water and have a very small range of chemistry available to our molecular machines, because everything has to be in solution and so forth and so on. Like I was saying, the way I got into this was I was trying to design a robot. And I said, well, what if we had a mature nanotechnology and I was going to design a robot, that was going to walk around and clank and do all the robot stuff. And I realized that in order to have the same strength as a human, the major problem with the robot would be that it would blow away in the wind because it was so light. And when I came to the end of that design process, I realized that the human body really just isn't in the same league as properly designed nanotechnology machines. Actually, I have, and I don't have a really good answer for it, except to say that it might make sense for all of us to buy stock in something before that happens. But I'd like to knock some ideas around with you over it, because the way things are right now, it certainly is probably the biggest problem that I see. I don't know. I think viruses of the kind that we catch, like the cold and so forth, are a fairly sophisticated piece of matter. I mean, that's not dumb matter. That's something that not only is molecularly structured, but takes advantage of a very specific vulnerability in the way that multicellular animals, actually single cells too, work. And so we are already living in a world where there are agents that are sophisticated and structured and take advantage of us, and I don't see it being enormously different with nanotechnology, except that we may have gotten one step ahead for a while.